Principal Consulting Engineer at Data Science.
Thank you. Actually, I'm Principal Data Scientist, a little typo, no big deal though. Yeah, so thanks everybody for coming out to listen to me. This is a little less technical of a talk than I usually give, but I had some thoughts about the field of data science I wanted to share, and maybe even get a conversation spurred amongst the community, and what better place to do it than at Big Data Day LA. So we also end this with a little bit of an announcement about the company I work at, Data Science. So let's start this in an unexpected place. Most of you know about LIGO, it's part of CERN. One of the most advanced scientific pieces of equipment the human race has ever built. Does an incredible amount of computation and work. I could sit here and talk to you about the big data problems it has, or some of the machine learning that goes into it, but actually I want to talk about it more as a topic of metrology. Metrology being the study of measurement. It is probably the most precise device the human race has created to measure things. Arguably, but certainly one of the top 5. We all know big data allows us better results because we can build more sophisticated models. They have more diversity of training examples, and things like the central limit start to click in that allow us to do our work a lot more efficiently than when we work on only small data. Precision of measurement is something I think data scientists should be talking more about, and especially precision in business. If we were to talk about LIGO, spent 8 years building this, started over a decade ago, actually is working and detecting gravity waves as of this year, and is managed by over 1,000 scientists by some estimates. We take on some big projects in data science, not quite this big or at this sort of cost. LIGO, if we were to go meet the team that built it, we talked to engineers about how deeply they study and construct machines to take very precise measurements. And that's why, that's why they're able to do really what they do. In the business world, we don't necessarily have that sort of precision. There's a lot of challenges, and I'll get into some of them, around what we get as our inputs as data scientists. And I think a discussion more about how things are measured, data governance, data provenance, need to be as impactful as the big data discussion. And focus really around value delivery. This is a quote from Szilard, who I assume most people in this room know, a great member of the community, organizer of datascience.la. A couple years ago, he started a new meetup, in addition to the other great meetups. This one, the Data Warehousing, BI, and Analytics meetup. And a quote from his kickoff email announcing it that I'll read was, "Despite the hype of big data, a majority of business value produced by data still happens in the more traditional setting, and we'd like to support these communities." And to be clear, what I assume he means by traditional setting is like, run a SQL query, do a histogram, and that will convince an executive what they need to know. And while it's great to build fun models, do complex things, work on the latest and greatest technology, in the applied data science and industry, we're here to add value to the companies we work for. So getting back to kind of the measurement of things, think about bias, variance, and heterogeneity in the data we get. These are 3 more or less quotes I've had people say to me in my career, so wanted to run through some of these, and some of you will maybe relate to my struggles. But until late last year, tracking would mostly be down unpredictably after almost every release. So go get all the tracking data and build a model. But I have these big gaps. What can I do with that? In some sense, I would say that that organization needed to have a little bit more data maturity and understand that while release is important to pushing product forward, tracking is important to what data science can contribute. We changed the way we captured that last April and again in January. Now, that might be okay. That might mean we just have a lot more cleanup work to do. But it also is indicative of, for one thing, growth and the growing pains that businesses go through, but also that maybe earlier on, that organization could have been thinking harder about data and how they can leverage in their organization. And how data is essentially a form of measurement, and highly precise measurements are what allow us to do good work. Similarly, we have 4 divisions that all do their analytics slightly differently. Different platforms, different labels, no common keys or anything. This one can be actually even more problematic. Some of you will have heard the story of, I think it was a KDD Cup, where they were given, KDD is a lot like Kaggle competitions. I think they still go on, but it was preceded that, if I'm not mistaken. They took some data from some sort of breast cancer scanning device, and they wanted to see what could machine learning researchers use if we know the outcomes. Can they train a good model? And the data that people got was formatted very numerically. It might have made sense to someone that knew the apparatus and the sort of specifics of that field, but for most machine learning people was just data, just features, F1 through F99 or whatever the case may be. And included was an ID. Now most of us would obviously take out that ID. There's no reason to include an ID in a prediction because the last 4 digits of my social security number should not be very predictive about anything about me. In the same way an ID assigned to me at a hospital should just be some sequential number and not really be informative. But some people, whether on purpose or on accident, include that, found that the ID was actually very predictive. And in this case, it was because that ID was actually, the data set was an amalgamation of 4 different hospital data sets. And the sequences of IDs were different at each of those locations. So of course, that now became like could be treated like a linear discriminant. And there was some point where you could essentially determine which hospital they were at. One hospital did a lot of screenings, one hospital was like a more intensive care type place. So naturally, if you've been diagnosed with cancer, you're more likely to have really bad cancer. Whereas if you've gone for a screening, not necessarily the same case. I think a lot of people know that part of the story. One part that's not as well known is that even beyond that, the calibration of those machines was artifacted in the data. So even without the ID, it's possible that a very well-intentioned researcher could have actually detected the machine that the data came from rather than the actual causal feature in the data set. Now that's really tricky and hard to understand. I wouldn't say that's in the same category as some of these problems that are a bit more like, maybe we should just take data more seriously. Those are problems that data scientists have to be vigilant about and saying, be very skeptical of their models and whatnot. I want to also talk a little bit about what I call the excitement scale, things we'd like to be working on, things we'd like to give talks about, right? Very few talks here today on writing better SQL queries. A little bit on deep learning and some stuff, and this list is intentionally a little bit controversial. I think all of you could cringe and say like something is missing from here or something shouldn't have been added. In fact, like I threw on commercial opportunities for quantum computing as a total wild card because I'm getting excited about this field. I really think we're maybe a decade out from the commercial viability of quantum computing, just as an aside. But we'd love, at least most data scientists, to be kind of working over here. But a lot of value gets delivered over here. Along the same lines, I think there's this hierarchy we can organize this into. Again, deliberately controversial. I think everyone would have a different structuring of this, and truly contextual bandit problems is not on the same scale of how often we can A/B test. This ought to be moved up, but for the sake of demonstration, there's definitely a hierarchy of how many opportunities we get in our career to work on these types of problems. I think I've worked on 4 really awesome deliverables in my career. I hope to work on many more, but I know there's a finite number of these things. A lot of value gets built down here, and a lot of these things are stepping stones to the cool problems. So I think as we're applied data scientists, it's important to realize that there's a big landscape, and getting to the really cool stuff, or the more exciting stuff, often requires more foundational work. And for people who aren't or starting out in the field, there's a lot more opportunity down here as well, even though there are a lot more talks and interesting things going on up here. So let's all listen, have discussions and new projects, but keep in mind we're trying to do value for our employers. So effectiveness of measurement. Most data scientists, machine learning people will be very familiar with some of these diagnostics. We use these in helping us solve the problems we're working on, evaluate the quality of our solutions, and the iterative improvements we make. We do 6 months extra work. We want to raise the accuracy and precision. We have good ways of measuring that. I think these are the diagnostics people know. Maybe there are others we should add, but by and large, the community's gotten really good at this type of diagnostic work. Not necessarily as good at other diagnostics, more, let's say, business-oriented diagnostics. So what's return on investment? What did the work we put into something actually deliver for a company? Very hard to estimate, and I think that's maybe why we shy away from it. Go spend some time and try and build a model and tell me in advance how much money I'm going to make based on it. Not a real easy thing to do. But at the end of the day, that's what the actual impact is. So I think I tend to, and I would like to promote that in general the community, think more about some of these factors as we work through how we evaluate the delivery we've done. So I'll talk through a couple of them. Lift in particular being the idea that you have some existing system. Let's say you work at an e-commerce company and e-retail, and they have an off-the-shelf recommendation engine in place. Great, I'm sure it's recommending products. You can associate conversion to it at some level. You could probably do better internally. Is it worth doing? Well, what kind of improvement can you make by custom tailoring a solution to fit the unique needs, assuming you have unique needs in the particular business you're in. If it's a 1% lift and you're a company that does $1 million a year, that might not be worth the human capital investment in it. But of course, a company like Netflix, where they can move the needle 0.0001% on recommendations and it has a huge impact on their business, well worth doing. An idea, I don't know that I'm coining this, but one I'd like to propose we look at a little bit more is impact factor. This is not really a diagnostic, but a measure that comes more out of academia. Impact factor of a journal or of an article is how often it's cited. So let's look at, let's talk about code for a moment. So you have some software. The software engineers know about code coverage, right? When you write unit tests, you'd like to say that a certain amount of the lines of code are all hit during the test. And that's a good measure of how well have the tests covered that code base. When you build a machine learning model and add in new features or new complexity or new levels of ensembling, could we do the same thing? Could we say, what's the impact of this added feature? How many decisions got made differently because of its presence? Or if we were to update the precision of one of those measurements, how many decisions would have been different? So, for example, let's say we were working in some sort of company that decided whether or not to grant loans to people, or allow them to rent apartments, or just make a binary decision, yes or no, we will engage in business dealings with you. There are probably some weak features in there, and I say weak feature meaning imprecise features. Features that are known to be faulty, don't have LIGO level precision, maybe have handwritten notes that are transferred into them by sales reps, and some reps do a better job than others. Then you have an NLP system that is doing its best job doing feature extraction, but is only able to work with the data that was given to it. That can be cleaned up. Is it worth it? Is it worth putting some rules on your sales staff that they have to put in better, more robust descriptions, or hiring people that's their specific job? What do we think we can get out of that added value? Measures lift, but impact as well, we can say how many times with the version 2 of a model did the changes we make actually end up changing the decision? Because ultimately any model is, this classification model, is going to be used to inform some business decision. If it's a binary classifier like, hire, don't hire, make the offer, don't, largely if you have an existing model, it must be at least decent, right? Better than random, doing some good. And the new model ought to be doing something different. Otherwise, obviously, why would you build it? It's the same thing. So for the choices where there is a difference, those are the key cases where we could say, this is the efficacy of the added value of the new iteration we've built in. So the accuracy tells us about how well the training data set and test data set are then predicted using the model, but it doesn't necessarily tell us about the impact factor of the business. I'm also a big fan of causal impact. It's some research primarily coming out of Google. I don't know that I have time here in my short talk to cover it, but it's something I think can add a lot of value to data scientists doing work in industry. Causal impact is a package for essentially trying to measure out the effect of a treatment that goes into maybe one market. So they use it a lot in advertising. Let's say you show some ads in market A but not market B. If you know historically how A predicts B, that they correlate to some degree, you can attempt to net out the difference, the regular seasonality and ups and downs that both the markets will experience by saying, in the past, market A predicted market B in this way. Those predictions, or the results have deviated from prediction after the treatment and given a burn-in period for a certain amount. That's causal impact. And I like it a lot because it's sort of a soft statistic, but it's robust in a way that at least in my experience, I've never had the opportunity to do really perfect rollouts and really separated, A/B tests and change fundamental important pieces of a business and be able to precisely say that we've measured the exact change. But something like causal impact allows us to do some backwards-looking things, and I think it fits very well into these more effectiveness measures I want to talk about. The last one, value of information. I cover a lot, so if you've seen me talk before, sorry if I'm a broken record, but I love this one. What is the value of information? So I'm pushing that we should think like metrologists. We should talk about getting more precise measurements, or getting businesses to provide, helping businesses provide more precise measurements so the data scientists can do a better job. What is the value of those more precise measurements? Should I go tell my boss I need $1.1 million or $1 billion to build LIGO because that's going to help us in some way? Well, no matter what, I can make a decision at any time. I can flip a coin, make an uninformed decision. So there's some expected revenue if I do not know new information. And there's presumably a higher expected revenue if I do know some information, and of course, the cost to get that information. This is the value of information equation. And I like it because it's simple algebraically and appeals very highly to executives. This is not hard to understand. F1 score, as much as many people in this room probably get that and are able to work with it and appreciate it, value of F1 score doesn't necessarily appeal to the common business executive user. The value of information, I think, intuitively can. Now, calculating these expected values and things like that can take some stats and some decision theoretic formulations, and that can be tricky, but at least the model, I think, is what's really useful, and we should describe data science work and the impact of big data work more with frameworks like this. I also think we should talk more about Goodhart's law. Some people may know this in the room. It's an idea more common in economics, but I think it has a huge place in data science. Goodhart's law, in its simplest form, says that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So I think of something like FICO score. I have a credit card sitting in a drawer at home that I will never use because I don't like something the credit card company did. Why don't I just cancel that? Well, because I'm aware that the FICO algorithm looks at how much the history of open credit. So if I have a very old credit card that I've had for a while, that reflects good on me. So I'm now arbitrarily changing my behavior to affect an algorithm. That's insane. It doesn't make sense to be measuring that, but it's this sort of artifact that's been left by FICO. And I think largely it's there because probably there's restrictions on how they can change that. I don't really know that side of things, but that was something. FICO score is important, right? It allows you to buy things, cars, homes, stuff like that. So we're going to try and manipulate it. And a lot of the things data scientists do, from ranking the way listings go on search engines and sites, or putting ads in certain places, or optimizing just about any business process, someone is going to try and manipulate that, and that system will change. We will see drift in our model. And Goodhart's law is a nice little anecdote I think we can also share with the people who are the benefactors of the services we provide. And this is my attempt at visually providing some semblance of what that means. Let's see. So along those lines, I would talk about, I think I was going to do that later, situation where, I'll share a little story. So I was at a company, going to be a little vague because it's sort of a disparaging story. There was a system that was kind of legacy. It did some optimization on the site that this company managed and essentially made choices that affected the users, and it was directly tied to our revenue. It was built many years ago. I showed up at the very tail end of the building of that process. I didn't contribute much to it. It was sort of in maintenance mode, and it was built very well, so not much had to be done, and it continued to drive a pretty significant margin for that business. Over the years, it just kept chugging away, and the business wasn't big enough that it was worth the investment of a higher precision or keep tweaking that. If we added a 3% improvement, that, in terms of dollar value, wouldn't have justified our salaries. So we left that system alone. Executives and leadership changed over as things do, and at some point someone came in and said, you know what, I don't know what this thing is. What's this cord running through my office? I'm just going to cut it. They did that, and we saw an immediate plummeting of revenue. I didn't stay too long after that, for that and many other reasons. But as much as I look back and blame that executive and eye roll and all that sort of thing, I'll take some responsibility too. I think it should have been my team's responsibility to go and be educating and proactive and say, this is what our system is, this is how it works, this is how we're measuring it, this is why we know it's good. And if you'd like to know more about it, let's run a little A/B test or do something to validate that yes, it's still working as expected, it's not drifting, all these sorts of things. That executive had never had a conversation with us, probably didn't even know that we were the ones that built it. And that sort of communication breakdown, I don't know where we put the blame, but maybe we can evangelize our own work internally and externally, and that can benefit the organizations we work for. So on the topic of the evolving landscape of data science, iteration is, I think, key to any data science process. I would be find it very hard to believe that if someone told me they came in, did all their feature engineering, one pass, built a model, it was great, they went home. In my experience, maybe people are better at this sort of thing than I am, but it's constant iteration. Get a quick model up, find its flaws, improve upon it, get it to the point where it's production worthy, and from there keep going. So early objectives are probably simple. Things like, how do we maximize a conversion rate? Or, do we send an offer or not? So very, very simple binary classification. Should we raise or lower a budget? Don't specify the amount, just say a directional thing. Predict some number of machine failures. Don't pinpoint why, just give some Poisson distribution that you fit of how often we're going to experience them. these are common sort of simple approaches to the types of problems a data scientist might solve. And I've made them deliberately simple because I think getting out an easy model that's effective is going to be a lot faster having impact on an organization and justify the iteration towards what are maybe more mature or what I'd call late objectives. So where you start maximizing conversion rate, great, probably has an improvement for the business. Ultimately, what's probably most fiscally responsible is maximizing lifetime value. So maximizing for conversion rate alone could put you into a system where you're very myopic and unbeknownst to you, your optimization is focused on very short-term singular sales. So that could be like misrepresenting a product or providing a bad user experience but pushing for a close. Whereas realistically, what's probably beneficial to most businesses is not, do I sell you on the day you click, but what can I earn from the lifetime relationship I establish with the customer? So that is a harder thing to model. It takes a lot more data, a lot more thinking and modeling. This model can probably get out into production in a few months. This model takes a lot of time. So can we specify our objectives in a clear, simple, and yet effective way and convince our stakeholders that it's an iterative process towards more sophisticated objectives? As well, harkening back to some of my earlier comments about frustrating things I heard about data quality and whatnot, every organization is going through data maturity in my experience. Maybe there are a few, maybe we could point to some of the top tech companies and say they've got it all figured out. But by and large, every company has some skeletons in the closet data-wise. And those have to be addressed, and that takes time. So if you have very imprecise data, you can't possibly build a sophisticated, what I would call late-term objective model. So build what you can, have an impact, and while you're going through that process, be a steward of good data process and help your organization evolve. A lot of that is through business conversations. So how do we really have an impact? Some impact is through product. So taking the case of like a recommendation system, a colleague of mine told me of a use case where they had a recommendation engine and they were working on tweaking it, improving it, and they were doing a good job making iterative, constant improvements that really justified the team's salaries and work. Yet a product group came in and said, we want to do away with the recommendation engine, or at least put it on the side, and we just want to show related items that also appear in the images above. And this had a huge impact on conversion, immediate impact. And I've seen this same sort of approach in the furniture industry and in retail. So the retail case would be where there's a model wearing 3 garments maybe. The top garment is what's being focused on. The bottom garment is not related to the actual item, but wouldn't you like it in the links below? In the furniture example, you have a picture of a living room, it's selling the couch, but also there's lamps and rugs. Those associated items should be on that page if someone happens to know those and wants to buy those. That's probably a more effective approach to sales than a standard, just basic off-the-shelf collaborative filtering type system. So does that mean we give up on recommendation? No. Does that mean a data scientist has to come up with that idea? Maybe. But it's constant conversations with product people that will have those opportunities emerge. A data scientist might rush into that and say, we got to do deep learning. We got to figure out what other items are in that image, and we got to then list those at the bottom. That's a really hard problem, actually. Even if you start with Café and get yourself a little boost or some other transfer learning approach, you've got a long road to walk to do that. And it's going to be hard to justify that value. So why don't we start with just a concept and a small test, maybe some hand-labeled data, show that this actually works, and then talk about how we automate away that human involvement and scale this thing up. So different opportunities will emerge as you talk to different product owners. I think data science, as DJ Patil says, it's a team sport. I think the team is larger than just engineers and data scientists. It has to pull in the product people who can tell us a little bit about what they're thinking, what they're open to, and how different ideas might impact the business. I also want to talk a little bit about titling. So in the software engineering world, again, somewhat controversial. You guys might not exactly agree with my timeline, but I think the sentiment's there. At some point, people were called computer programmers. I'd say more the 90s. Great title, great job. Somewhere in the 90s, there was a title explosion. Now you're front end, you're back end, you're a DBA, you're VLSI, a very large scale integration engineer, QA, embedded systems. And today we have a list I couldn't possibly fit on a slide of all the titles one might have that might have been just called this. As software engineering has evolved, new technologies have emerged, the stack has gotten more like lasagna. The The same thing is happening in data science, I think, or it should. We kind of centered around data scientists, and maybe we distinguish ourselves as data scientists and data engineers, but the number of people walking around with a data scientist title who do things that have absolutely nothing to do with one another is pretty incredible. And I never want our field to get into a no true Scotsman type situation where someone says, you're not a real data scientist, or you are, or you aren't. I think if we specialize our titles a little bit at some point in the future, it would benefit everyone in understanding what each other do and communicating to organizations how we work and what we work on. And that's going to be hard when this title that some of us have bears this moniker of being the sexiest job of the whatever, 21st century, whatever. We'd like to hold on to that claim, right? But honestly, I would rather see a little Cambrian explosion of titling come along, and curious to hear what people's thoughts are on that. Similar timelines. Technology evolves really fast, and the tools that data scientists might use change a lot. The stuff that was around and I learned when I was in college is like dinosaur stuff today. Everything I work on day to day didn't exist. The Jupyter notebooks that I work at every day that I love are a recent invention. Didn't exist when I was in school. Again, this is meant to be deliberately controversial. Some people will say I've missed things or it bears my bias. I was thinking about putting this list on GitHub and accepting pull requests. Say like, you guys should tell me, what do you think is important? What should be on this sort of list? But I realized if I did that, I'd probably get to this. So the point being, our field, like many, needs constant learning and a constant evolving landscape of the tools and the technologies and the methods, and there needs to be a continuing education. Luckily, we live in a great city. I'll go out on a limb and say better than San Francisco. LA has a better community, more opportunities, not just in working, maybe less in working perhaps, but to get out, meet our collaborators and our peers and talk. Events like Big Data Day, great series of meetups that you can find in different events, MOOCs, boot camps. There's tons of places to learn and converse. Podcasts are my personal favorite. I host the Data Skeptic podcast, if any of you guys are interested in checking that out. And there are many people also doing other data podcasts you should check out. I'd be happy to give recommendations too. Books and blogs, we all learn in different ways. So as a community, I'd like to see more conversations going on because things move so fast. It's really hard to keep up. As part of that, Data Science is going to be launching this Data Forward event series. So our moniker for it is, it's like TED, but for data professionals. So if anyone interested, we're going to have these, I think, monthly in our Culver City office. That's our new meetup link. We'd love to get you guys signing up, get involved in the conversation. We're looking for speakers, but mostly we're looking to start conversations and make sure that our field is evolving in a really peer-driven and aggressive way, because the impact for data science on business is pretty unprecedented. We've seen that, and the argument that things should be data-driven is pretty much long past. That's well established. But the next step is for us to be effective in being data-driven, and that's hard, and I think it takes a lot of constant learning and just sharing war stories and stuff like that. So it's great to be at events like this, and I hope some of this was helpful to you guys. Contact stuff, if you're interested in data science, here's all of our info. We do data science as a service. You can learn more about us at datascience.com as well, and you can follow me on Twitter if you'd like, @DataSkeptic. And I think there's time for questions. No questions? All right, cool. Thank you.